Historically within financial services, and I think of one specific leader particularly who I know just loves a good plan. And then whenever COVID happened, the best laid plans of mice and men, they really did go awry, to quote Hemingway on that. So when you look at that idea of the plan, letting go to grow once again, but also being a lifelong learner. You mentioned you're one who, when it comes to the 5 to 10% of people who are all in on change, not everyone is that way. You're very empathetic to that fact, just as I am. I know you and your team, y'all just wrapped up the Digital Growth University, where y'all were learning core banking on digital growth principles and methodologies. And as I've always said, sometimes you're the teacher, other times you're the student, but either way, that there's always something to learn through the experience. What's been the experience for you? What's been the big insights that you've learned from your time in the Digital Growth University with your team?
I think it was earlier on, but we were learning about, storytelling, and it really comes back to purpose. When people are uncomfortable with technology, I think at the very beginning I was thinking, oh, if the company's not on the same page, if the organization, if our senior team or our CEO is not on the same page. But I think the biggest risk is not having your frontline staff on the same page. They're afraid of automation. There's fear of being replaced. And what I've learned through this class is that they're not being replaced, they're being augmented, they're getting the resources they need to do their job well, to quote Gallup. But they're getting the basic building blocks of what they need, and then we're building on that. And so what I've tried to do with my team is prepare them for a lot of the changes that are about to happen, because I'm ready to go on the changes. But what I've learned on these classes is that I need to get everybody on the same page so they don't get in the cave of complacency. And in order to do that, I've used storytelling, I've used purpose to try and bring them in, and also just, get the chance to do what you do best every day at work. Is what you do best filling out a spreadsheet? No. So let's look into technologies that are going to help you automate these spreadsheets and help you take all that data and put it together for us and read out a report with some thoughts and feelings about what those data points could mean without you having to sit there and do it yourself. So you can spend your entire day selling, talking to people about saving money, changing their life. I know their HELOC conversations are one of their favorite conversations of all time, when they can sit there and talk to someone about saving $1,000 a month. They don't have time to do that if they're filling out a spreadsheet. So it's really just about getting them to the point where they realize that technology is going to augment, not replace.
And I think that's a key lesson that anyone can take away who is watching or listening. There are 4 distinct steps for human transformation that I've identified. And a lot of times when we think about whether it be historically, quote unquote, digital transformation, or now the soup du jour, the word du jour is AI, it's all the same thing. It's technology. And when you think about digital transformation, and I think that's going to be the same is going to be true with AI, is 60 to 85% of these initiatives are going to either fail or fail to meet expectation, not because it's bad technology, but because of the people that are having to implement this. There's a lack of awareness, there's a lack of clarity, there's fear, if you will. And so the first step in human transformation is to help people see things from a different point of view and look at it just very objectively. And when you see different, you're going to think different. And as I've asked leaders many times before, well, what happens next? When you see and think different, what are you going to do? And they're like, well, I'm going to act different. I'm going to be different. I'm like, are you? And they're like, well, yeah. And I was like, well, how many times do you know that you need to do something right now, but you're not? And like, oh, I've never really thought about that before. I said, so to bridge the gap between thought and action comes down to feeling and emotion. And then the feeling, the emotion, the desire to now act, to do, to be different is greater than the desire to remain the same. When you think about your thinking and learning through this experience, not just yourself as an individual, but also as more of as a collective, as a cohort, what did you learn from others through this experience together? Because you were learning by yourself and you're doing some reflective thinking and writing, but then once a month we'd come together and have a conversation and get to go into different groups who might not normally get to have this type of a conversation. Where did your thinking maybe transform because of the thinking or the perspective of others through cross-pollination of ideas?
Well, certainly one of the biggest ones is that we have more technology than we realize. I think we grew quite quickly for many years, and we were privileged to do that. And our credit union is still very, very strong. And I'm really proud to work here. but we also grew at a pace where we had a lot of great ideas and the resources we needed to make those ideas happen without having some kind of system to say, well, where else could this be used in a really thoughtful way? Or maybe instead of getting this marketing tool that's number one to the marketing team, maybe we take a look at maybe something that would help also the business services team and our retail team and our back office. And maybe it's number two to the marketing team, but it also helps all of these teams. As an example, and we have plenty of technologies we've adopted in retail that we didn't consult with, another department. And certainly we have project managers that help with that. And that's gotten a lot stronger over the last couple of years. But prior to that, we would adopt some technologies without really talking to each other. And that would create these silos and also just lack of awareness of the other technologies that are out there. So when we start to look at a program, we go, oh, we already have something like that. Well, we could have already been tracking this part of your sales automatically, and we have a program that can do that in this other department. What?
Right.
So it's really just been about communication with each other and kind of bringing it back to center. We grew quickly, and now let's bring it back to center. And how can we adapt the technologies we already have? And then when we're looking at future technologies, I think one of my biggest changes in myself was not solving for now, but am I picking a technology that's going to grow with us, that's here for the long haul, that's not just a flash in the pan, and that's going to suit our future needs too, not just our immediate needs. And so working with other teams, it's all been about embracing what we already have. And then when we look elsewhere, talking to each other.
It's bringing the future, if you will, into the present moment based upon not just gaining awareness, but also maybe more importantly, alignment as well. Because back to your point, where there's a lack of alignment, there's also a lack of clarity. Where there's a lack of clarity, there's confusion. Where there's confusion, if we're in that constant state, then there's conflict and chaos. I know that the Digital Growth University, it's not just an investment of dollars, but even more so, it's the investment of time for yourself, time for your team. You mentioned this, even that when you're growing quickly, it's almost like you get stuck in the doing. This creates a forcing function to break free from doing just for a bit, to perhaps do some review and reflection, to obviously learn, to then think about how you can do even better. I'm curious though, because your group, your organization, there's definitely, I could see early, a growth mindset there. But that's not always the case at other organizations when it comes to things like learning and thinking. What is it that might hold either individuals or teams, perhaps even organizations, back from making a commitment to ongoing learning? I mean, you've done a lot of education too yourself internally, but what is it that holds people back from making a commitment to ongoing learning, which obviously the result is ongoing growth?
A reactive mindset. If you're constantly reacting to what's happening and needing to fix what you're dealing with, you're not going to have time to be proactive and learn about something else. The hardest thing to do, especially if you're working, in a high volume place like a branch, and every day in and day out you have a line out the door and you're trying to help that line. How in the world do you schedule one of your people off for a full day training to further their skills and help members even more and make the wait worth their while? How do you take them off the floor for that time to go do that training? How do you stop things that are already in motion to take time off? And you have to realize that you're only ever going to be reactive. You just keep reacting, you're not fixing some of the other problems. And so the simplest way I can put it is that branch mindset of, yes, you take that teller or banker off the line, maybe you lose a whole day, maybe you're short staffed that day, but I promise you the months following that, things are going to go smoother because you have somebody who's fully trained and who is excited and is learning and testing new skills. And so if you take that further, you're taking people in our positions where we have a lot to do every day, but yeah, you're going to be a little behind because you're taking time off to learn something, but it's going to be better in the long run.
It's almost like we could look at this through the lens of financial services. You're making a deposit, an investment in the present moment, that it doesn't feel like you're going to get anything right then and there. Just like when you make an investment into a CD or an IRA or any type of investment account, you're not going to get anything back immediately. But we know the time value of money. It's almost like there's a time value of education that will yield dividends within the weeks, months, and even the years to come.